Yumubile was the kind of village where the sun rose with gossip and set with stories, where chickens walked freely into neighbors' kitchens, and people lived in their compounds with open doors and open mouths. But in all its stories, the tale of Amaka and Chisholm was one that walked ahead of the others. They were not siblings, not lovers, but something deeper, two souls wrapped in the same cloth of destiny. Born weeks apart, they grew up sharing bowls of rice, fighting over mangoes, and bathing together in the village stream before sense and age drew the first lines of modesty between them. If you saw Amaka, you saw Chisholm. If Chisholm was missing, someone would shout, "Amaka, where is your husband?" And she would laugh, her white teeth flashing under the midday sun, replying, "He's fetching firewood, my dear." Their friendship had no beginning. It simply was. At 18, when the rest of the girls in Yumubile began shaping their wrappers tighter around their hips and tilting their voices sweeter when speaking to boys, Amaka stayed with Chisholm. They walked hand in hand to the farm, to the market, to the village square. Her heart, though quiet, beat for only him. But in Yumubile, dreams cost more than cassava, and life had its ways of stealing happiness in broad daylight. They both passed their university entrance exams, a miracle in a village where most children stopped at SS2 and picked up hoes instead of certificates. Amaka got her letter first, then Chisholm. The night of their celebration, Mama Ijike slaughtered a goat, and the neighbors gathered under the orange tree beside her compound. The moon was high, and the palm wine flowed freely. Old men praised Chisholm. Women called Amaka a jewel with sense. Drums beat softly in the background, and the air was filled with the scent of promise. But promise, like smoke, often disappears into the air. A week later, Amaka sat in her mother's small bedroom. Her mother, Mama Neka, had counted the crumpled naira notes hidden inside an old wrapper she kept inside her wooden trunk. 10 years of savings from hawking okra, pepper, and bitter leaf under the sun. Her last hope to fix the leaking roof and perhaps buy herself a sewing machine. Amaka, her mother had said with a cough, "When your university letter comes, we will use this money for your first year, then God will make a way." Amaka nodded, but inside her, something was breaking. She had seen the worry in Chisholm's eyes. His father had no money. His mother was long dead. His uncle had promised to help, but promises didn't buy jam forms, not to talk of registration fees. That night, Amaka did not sleep. By morning, the money was gone. She wrapped the notes in a black nylon bag and handed it to Chisholm under the mango tree behind their compound. "Go," she whispered. "I'll stay back, help Mama in the market. When you finish, come back and marry me. We'll tell our children that you went to school because of my sacrifice." Chisholm's eyes watered. He knelt. He held her waist and said, "I swear, Amaka, I will never forget this. But God does not sleep, and neither does suffering." 3 months after Chisholm left for school in Enugu, Mama Neka fell ill. It began with a cough, then her eyes yellowed. The woman who once climbed palm trees for firewood now could not rise from her mat. The villagers whispered, "It is witchcraft." But Amaka knew what it was, poverty. The doctors at the small health center in Aka said it was liver failure and treatment would cost 60,000 Nigerian nairas, exactly what Amaka had stolen. That day, her mother called her close. "Amaka, my daughter. Inside the trunk, behind the wrapper I tied with a red cloth, there's some money. Go and bring it. Let us begin treatment." Amaka could not speak. Her feet refused to move. She stared at her mother's sunken eyes. The same eyes that had cried when she first took her first steps, that had stayed open through rainy nights, watching the window to make sure she returned home from the farm. She left the hospital and never came back. By the time she returned to Yumubile, her mother's corpse was already covered in a white cloth. The burial was quiet. There were no drums, only silence. No one knew why Amaka had disappeared that day. No one asked, but the look on her face kept the tongues from wagging. For 3 years, she stopped laughing. She stopped wearing colors. She stopped waiting for anyone to call her our wife. But still, she waited. For Chisholm. She waited for the man who held her youth in his hands. And then one morning, when the cocks had barely crowed and the sky was still yawning into daylight, Chisholm returned. But he did not come alone. The morning Chisholm returned, the air in Yumubile grew heavy, as though even the earth knew that something sacred was about to be shattered. He came in a red Toyota Camry, the kind that made children run after it shouting, "Odogwu!" Big man. The car's tires stirred red dust that danced in the air like spirits awakened from slumber. Women looked out from their verandas. Men paused their conversations under the orange trees. And even goats stopped chewing to see what kind of homecoming this was. Chisholm stepped out of the car first. Taller now, his skin smoother, his clothes louder. He wore sunglasses, and his beard was shaped like a Lagos musician. But the real shock came when the passenger door opened. A woman stepped out. Not a girl. A woman. Light-skinned, lips thick with lipstick. Her wrapper tied too tight for decency. She wore gold from ears to ankles, and when she laughed, it sounded like she didn't know sorrow. She was old enough to be Chisholm's aunt, yet she held his hand like a bride walking down the aisle. The silence in the village square was so loud it could crack a calabash. It was Mwakigo, the local tailor's daughter, who ran to Amaka's house. She banged on the bamboo door like it owed her something. Amaka, come outside, oh. Come and see what your Chisholm brought back from the city. Amaka, who had just finished peeling cassava for fufu, stepped out slowly. Her wrapper was old, her blouse was faded, and her feet were dusty. But her eyes were wide with hope. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward the gathering crowd, her heart beating louder than the drums during New Yam Festival. She pushed through the murmuring people, and then she saw him, her Chisholm, her boy from the stream, her secret husband. He was standing beside the woman, grinning from ear to ear. He saw her, and for a moment, just a breath of a second, the smile on his face disappeared. But then he recovered. Amaka, he said flatly, nodding like he was greeting a classmate. Chisholm, she breathed. Ah, the woman beside him said, chewing gum with confidence. So this is the famous Amaka you used to talk about? The crowd murmured. Talk about her? To this woman? Amaka stood there, her heart crumbling slowly, piece by piece. The woman looked at her like someone examining a house help. She's humble-looking, she said. Chisholm chuckled. That's Amaka for you. Quiet girl. Always been that way. A boy from the crowd shouted. But Chisholm, this is Amaka na? Our Amaka. The one that waited for you. Chisholm raised his hand casually. Everybody should calm down. I beg. Let's not start village drama. I came back to show appreciation to people who supported me. Then he turned to Amaka. And you, he said. I heard your mother died. That's really sad. Sorry for your loss. And thanks for the support you gave me back then. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick brown envelope. Here, this should cover what you gave me. I added some extra. He stretched the money toward her like one would feed a dog. But Amaka did not move. Her throat burned. Her hands shook. Her legs felt like they no longer belonged to her. Chisholm, she whispered. Why? He laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. Why what? You gave me money. I didn't put a gun to your head. Did I beg you? Did I sign any agreement? Gasps filled the air. Even birds paused mid-flight. I gave you my mother's savings, Amaka said, her voice breaking. She died because I couldn't bring the money back. She begged me on her deathbed. I ran away, Chisholm. I ran and never returned. I buried her with a guilty heart. Chisholm clicked his tongue. Nawao, you should have told her the truth then. Not my fault. A beg, take the money. The older woman giggled. Baby, let's go. These village people like drama. As they walked away, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one said a word. No one dared. Chisholm and his mistress entered the car and drove off, leaving only dust, shame, and the sound of a woman's heart breaking. Amaka stood there, the brown envelope still hanging in the air. A full minute passed before her trembling hand accepted it. She turned around and began to walk. Not home, not to the stream. She walked past the narrow footpath leading out of Yumubile, past the mango trees, past the last compound, past everything that once made her heart swell. That was the day Amaka left Yumubile. Nobody saw her again for 2 years. There were whispers, she's gone mad. She's in Lagos selling her body. She joined a cult. But nobody knew the truth. And the truth was that Amaka went to Aka first. She used the money to rent a room beside a roadside mechanic shop. She bought a wheelbarrow and began hawking fried groundnuts and chin-chin. She carried her past on her back and her guilt in her throat. But she worked, morning till night. She did not look at men. She did not make friends. She counted her profits like a widow counts her tears. And soon, she saved enough to rent a small shop. She started selling provisions, then groceries, then fabrics, then bags of rice. 1 year passed, then another. People started calling her Madam Amaka. Children in her street followed her, singing, "Auntie Groundnut has become Auntie Warehouse." But her heart remained cold. Men came, rich ones, poor ones, fine ones, polite ones, but she had no room for any of them. Each night, she whispered to the sky, "I gave love, and it killed my mother. I will never love again." Back in Yumubile, Chisholm was now living like a ghost. The older woman eventually left him for a richer, younger boy. His big car was seized. He returned to the village with his tail between his legs. But no one told Amaka. She didn't need to know. She had stopped waiting. Yumubile had a way of forgetting people when they left, but not Amaka. Not the girl who loved too deeply, gave too much, and vanished like fog at sunrise. Her story lingered in every corner of the village. It danced with the smoke from cooking fires and rested in the laps of gossiping women who still tapped their chins and said, if not me, I for no survive that cane heartbreak." But Chisholm's story changed faster than dry season harmattan. When the older woman who had brought him back like a trophy husband finally discovered he was all mouth and no pocket, she left him in the middle of a supermarket in Onitsha with nothing but his ego and the clothes on his back. He returned to Yumubile quietly. No car, no girlfriend, no pride. He came on a bike, holding a nylon bag, wearing the same shirt he left with months earlier. This time, there were no drums, no shouting children, no curious elders, just silence and disappointment. His uncle refused to house him. His aunt said the compound was full. He ended up squatting in the abandoned house where his grandmother used to live before the termites took over the ceiling. His phone no longer rang. Even the village boys who once called him Odogwu now looked away when he passed. Some mocked him under their breath. Others greeted him with forced smiles and quickly walked away. He tried to find Amaka. He asked people, quietly, shamefully, but all they could say was, "She's doing well now. She left the past in the dust where it belongs." In Akka, Amaka was blooming. Her business had grown like yam in fertile ground. She now owned 2 shops, one for wholesale provisions and the other for fabrics. Her name was on lips she never touched. Her respect stretched beyond the street where she started. Other women called her Madam with sense. But she still wore no ring, still had no husband, still came home every night to silence. There was a man who came often, Ibuka, a gentle, tall pharmacist who had returned from abroad. He bought biscuits from her shop every Saturday and always lingered longer than necessary. His eyes were kind. His smiles were soft. His heart was eager. But Amaka had built walls too tall for any man to climb. One evening, Ibuka stood by her counter, holding a pack of glucose and a bottle of malt. "You're always alone," he said. "You never laugh. You never let anyone in. Are you protecting something, or are you protecting yourself?" Amaka looked at him, her fingers gently folding the nylon bag. "There's nothing to protect, just some wounds that never healed." Ibuka said nothing. He handed her the money, took his change, and walked away. Amaka watched him go. Her heart beat slowly, once, twice, then returned to its old rhythm of silence. In Yumubile, Chisholm was fading. The once handsome boy was now gaunt. The village mechanic gave him odd jobs, pushing broken cars, changing tires. Sometimes he fetched firewood for elderly women just to buy Gary. But each night, he sat under the mango tree behind his grandmother's old house, staring at the sky as if waiting for it to open and swallow him. He thought of Amaka often, of her voice, her smell, her tears. He remembered the brown envelope, the way she looked at him that day, like someone who'd been stabbed in the stomach and was too stunned to scream. He told himself lies. She'll forgive me. She still loves me. It wasn't my fault. But even the wind knew the truth. Then one day, fate stirred again. A wedding was happening in Akka, a big one. The daughter of a wealthy Igbo businessman was marrying a senator's son. It was the kind of wedding that made the front page of newspapers and flooded Instagram stories. The kind that brought important people to town. And among the caterers invited was Amaka's catering business. Yes, she had started catering too. She did not cook, but she employed women who did. She handled large orders, packaged beautifully, served with class. It was part of her dream to create jobs for other women like her, silent warriors with painful pasts. She didn't know who would be at the wedding. She didn't care. She just wanted to do her job. But fate has a way of taking old pages and making them the cover story. That day, Chisholm was in Akka too. He had followed a group of Yumubile men who were hired to set up tents and arrange chairs. A man from the next village had told him, "You go fit earn like 10,000 Nigerian nairas if you work well." Chisholm jumped at it. He had no idea whose wedding it was. He didn't care. All he knew was that he needed the money. The wedding reception was grand. White canopies, gold chairs, live band, MCs that cracked ribs. Everything was perfect. Amaka was in charge of coordinating food delivery. She wore a sky blue lace gown, modest but elegant. Her hair was braided in neat cornrows, her earrings simple. She moved with confidence, clipboard in hand, giving orders, checking off names. The sun hit her skin, and it glowed. That was when Chisholm saw her. He was carrying a chair, sweating under the afternoon sun. He turned, and there she was. Amaka, the girl who once gave him her mother's savings. The girl he had discarded like used paper. The girl who now looked like someone born of royalty. He froze. The chair dropped from his hand. Amaka didn't see him yet, but he saw everything. How other women ran to her. How the event organizers called her madam. How even the senator's wife hugged her. His throat dried. His hands trembled. Then their eyes met. For 1 second. Just 1 second. And he knew. She was no longer his. The silence that fell between their eyes in that moment was louder than the music blaring from the wedding speakers. Chisholm stood rooted beside the water dispenser, a tray of plastic cups trembling in his hands. Sweat dripped down his back, not from the heat, but from the rising wave of shame that curled inside him like a wild animal. Amaka had not moved. She stood beneath a white canopy, clipboard in hand, her chin slightly raised, her sky blue lace gown flowing gently with the breeze. The afternoon sun touched her skin like a blessing. Everything about her, her posture, her presence, her power, spoke one language. I survived without you. The silence stretched. He wanted to run to her, to kneel, to cry, to explain that life had beaten him into a shadow, that the woman he left her for had used and dumped him like waste, that he had no home now, no future, and no peace, that he thought of her every night he slept on the cold mat in his grandmother's leaking house. But her eyes, they did not see him the same way. Not anymore. They didn't tremble. They didn't water. They didn't soften. They looked at him like one might look at an old photo of a life they no longer claimed. He took a step forward. "Amaka," he said hoarsely. She turned her head slightly and glanced past him like she didn't hear. "Amaka, please," he whispered again, setting the tray down carefully and moving closer. She finally faced him, calmly, like one facing a stranger who knows too much about their past. "Yes," she said. He swallowed. "You look different." "Thank you. I didn't know you were into catering now. That's big." She nodded. "Yes, it is. A lot has changed." "I see," he said, eyes darting. "You look beautiful. Wealth suits you." There was a beat of silence before she responded. "Poverty shaped me. Wealth found me. But I don't owe either of them love anymore." He winced at the weight of her words. "I've thought about you," he continued, voice lower now. "About everything. I regret it all, Amaka. What I did to you, it wasn't fair." She looked at him, not with hate, not even anger, with something far worse, peace. That deep, unshakable peace that comes when the heart no longer hopes. "I forgave you a long time ago, Chisholm," she said softly. "Not for your sake. For mine." He blinked. "You did?" "Yes," she replied. "After I saw my mother in a dream, smiling. She told me to let go. She said she was proud of the woman I'd become. That was when I knew I had to stop waiting." Chisholm lowered his head, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. "Amaka, I have nothing left. I came back home to nothing. I was foolish, blind. I thought money was everything. I thought I'd find happiness in shortcuts." "And did you?" "No," he said, voice cracking. "I found myself alone, empty, haunted by what I threw away." Amaka was quiet. The wind picked up, rustling the decorations above them. Guests in the background laughed, danced, and clinked glasses. But here, in this tiny corner of the event, only 2 people existed. "You know," she said, her voice like warm charcoal, "I used to pray you'd come back. I'd imagine what I would wear, what I'd say. I thought that was love, waiting. But love doesn't mean losing yourself in someone who wouldn't even look back to check if you were bleeding. I know that now," he whispered. "I'm glad you do." There was a long pause. He looked at her once more. Her eyes held no space for him now. No trace of the girl who once sold vegetables, and believed love was sacrifice. No trace of the one who ran through village footpaths with him under the rain, dreaming of kitchen fires and laughter. That girl was gone. This woman had built something else. He stepped back slowly, the shame now fully formed, like a cloak wrapped tightly around his shoulders. "I'll go now," he said. "But thank you for listening." She nodded. He turned and began to walk away. Halfway through the crowd, he paused and looked back. Amaka was already gone, disappeared into the wedding hustle, into her life, into a future that no longer included him. 3 months later, Amaka's name had reached even Anambra State's capital. She was invited to speak at a women's empowerment forum. They wanted her to talk about how she built her business from a wheelbarrow to a warehouse. She wore a green Ankara dress with golden embroidery and held the microphone like a torch. Her words moved the crowd. "Some of us were taught that a woman's place is in the kitchen. But my mother cooked every day, and she died with an empty stomach. I learned that a woman's place is in her heart first, where her peace lives. If you protect that peace, you'll never beg for love." The crowd stood and clapped. And when she returned to her seat, Ibuka, the gentle pharmacist, was waiting. He didn't push. He didn't beg. He just smiled. And this time, Amaka smiled back. It wasn't wide. It wasn't loud. But it was real. In Yumubio, Chisholm still lived in the broken house. His friends had all moved on. The boys who once followed him now mocked him behind his back. He often sat under the mango tree, watching the clouds, whispering the name Amaka like a song that never reached its chorus. He sometimes saw her on TV, or in newspapers, or in flyers for women in business. But she never came back. And he knew, deep in his bones, that she never would.